In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 6th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Michigan versus Penn State. This matchup is not just another line on the Big Ten schedule. It feels like a stress test on how far a point spread can stretch before bettors start to flinch. You have Michigan rolling in at 13-0 overall and 3-0 in conference, walking around like the boss of the league and sitting right near the top of pretty much every ranking anyone checks on their phone. Across from them is Penn State at 9-5 and 0-3 in the Big Ten, still carrying the sting of that hard-fought loss to Illinois, plus a couple of very loud, very public blowouts on the resume that casual fans remember a little too well. So the market does what the market always does with an unbeaten powerhouse versus a shaky record. It hangs a massive road favorite number around the low to mid-20s and just dares people to be brave on the home side. Here is where it gets interesting. Michigan has looked like a freight train all season. They score at an elite clip, they guard at an elite clip, and their scoring margin looks like something out of a video game most nights. But the more you look at their profile, the more you notice that a lot of those demolition jobs came in very friendly environments, home floors and neutral courts where they control almost everything. Once you peel that back, you see the one little crack that matters for a spread this big. Away from home, they get just a bit loose with the ball, sitting outside the top 200 nationally in turnover rate in road and neutral games, which is not a disaster, but it is a wobble. Now match that up with what Penn State actually does well, and you start to see why people talk themselves into the dog. The Nittany Lions basically live in the turnover column. They are top 10 in the country in avoiding giveaways themselves and up in that upper tier defensively enforcing them, so they are winning that category night after night without having to play some wild, track meet style of basketball. That combination of taking care of the ball, poking it loose on the other end, and not rushing possessions is exactly how an overmatched underdog hangs around while everyone keeps checking the live line. Honestly, that is the classic recipe for the game where you look up with 4 minutes left and the big favorite is still not out of the woods. The building matters too. This one is in the Bryce Jordan Center, where Penn State is 7-2 at home compared with a modest 1-1 away from it, and that split tells you who they are right now. At home, they have already shown they can drag more talented teams into weird, uncomfortable games that feel nothing like a clean 90-second highlight package. On the road, they have been much shakier, which is bad news for their overall upside, but quietly helps you feel better about them actually showing up in this particular spot in front of their own crowd. A Tuesday night Big Ten home crowd that knows it is supposed to be overmatched can be surprisingly loud, especially if the dog gets a few early steals or threes and the students realize they have something to cheer for. Then you throw the injury layer on top, and it adds just enough chaos to a line that is already stretched. Michigan's leading scorer and rebounder is dealing with that calf issue and listed as a game-time decision, and their physical starting guard who took the shot above the eye is cleared, but he is coming off a facial injury that still had him in the news this week. That does not suddenly turn Michigan into a vulnerable team. They are deep, well coached, and still blowing people out when they are even close to full strength, but it does nudge their rotations, their rim pressure, and the way they stagger minutes. When you put all of this together, you get a very human spot where the undefeated giant is under pressure to win big on the road, while the home team that everyone has already written off gets 40 minutes to throw itself around, scrap for loose balls, and make this thing much messier and much closer than a spread in the 20s wants it to be. As our first pick for this matchup, the Penn State Nittany Lions to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. That kind of total in Big Ten play is basically a neon sign saying, this might look like an all-star game, and honestly, Michigan's offense alone gives you some idea why they went that high. They are sitting near 97 points per game, they shoot it efficiently, they share the ball, and they have been putting up scores that look more like something you see in an NBA box score when they really get rolling. If you just look at that side of the matchup, it is very easy to shrug and say, sure, let us expect a fireworks show. Here is the thing though, totals are not only about how fast the favorite sports car can go, they are also about the speed bumps, the traffic, and whether the other driver feels like flooring it. Penn State plays that other driver role almost perfectly right now. On the tempo charts, they sit down near that 272nd mark in possessions per game, which is a fancy, nerdy way of saying they are quite comfortable stretching each trip, running sets, and making every half-court possession feel like it takes a full shot clock. Their scoring profile backs that up. They average roughly 78 points scored and 74 allowed, and that usually drops their combined final scores into the low 150s. So you are talking about a team whose normal game lives about 12 or so points below this posted total, even before you account for opponent and nerves and late game slowdown. When you look at the actual results, the story stays roughly the same. You see that 73-65 loss to Illinois, a 76-72 battle with Michigan State, and then that 113-72 nightmare against Indiana where one team basically played out of its mind and Penn State got run off the floor. You can toss in the 80-46 loss to Pitt too, which is the other extreme, where the offense never really arrived and the whole thing felt like one long frustration. Those games tell you two things at once. When Penn State loses control completely, the score can balloon because the opponent never stops scoring, but when they are dialed in and the matchup is more even in energy, the total often lands in that grindy, mid-140s to low 150s window. That is the kind of range that makes a number like 164.5 feel aggressive unless both offenses are humming for all 40 minutes. Now factor in Michigan's defense, which is quietly the most important piece of the total conversation. They are not just winning with offense, they are also sitting at the very top of the national charts in defensive points per possession allowed, which means they are squeezing the life out of possessions as often as they are turning them into runouts. An elite defense walking into a building where the home offense has already put up only 46 points in a game this season is not exactly the recipe you draw up for both sides to trade haymakers for 2 hours straight. You can absolutely imagine a scenario where Michigan jumps out in front, that defense clamps down, and Penn State is forced into long, grinding trips that eat clock even when they go well. There is also a very human rhythm to a potential blowout that matters for the total. If Michigan builds a cushion, the priority often shifts from chasing some huge scoreboard number to managing minutes, staying healthy, and keeping legs fresh for the brutal Big Ten schedule that is still ahead. That is especially true when you have a key scorer dealing with that calf issue, because no one wants a soft tissue problem lingering just because they chased a few extra points on the road. Benches come in, possessions get a little slower, and even if the game never feels close on the scoreboard, the pace and shot quality can dip just enough to drag the total back towards something more reasonable. So while the total is priced like this could turn into a 40-minute dunk contest with both teams sprinting, the actual mix of a slow-paced home team, an elite road defense, and the natural tendency to ease off the accelerator late feels much more like a choppy, foul-heavy, stop-start Big Ten game that finishes below that sky-high number. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Duke versus Louisville. Duke walks into the KFC center as the team wearing the slightly heavier target on its back, sitting around 6th in the country while Louisville lives in that 16 to 20 range depending on which poll you check. The market has nudged Duke into a tiny road favorite role, basically a one-possession type of number, which is the oddsmaker's way of saying these two are close on paper, but one side has just a bit more trust baked in. You can see why. Duke sits at 13-1 with wins over Florida, Arkansas, Michigan State, and that fresh 91-87 road result at Florida State. And those games show something simple but important. They can live in a grind at 60 points, play in the 70s, or open it up into the 80s and 90s, and they still find ways to close the door. They are winning by close to 22 points per night on average, holding teams to roughly 65.5 while scoring about 87.3 themselves, which is what you expect from a group that can land the first punch and still answer back when someone swings at them. Louisville is no soft spot either, sitting at 11-3 with a top 20 label and an offense that hums around 91 to 92 points per game. But their defensive side of the story is looser, giving up somewhere in the high 60s, and the recent stretch has felt a bit shakier. A big loss at Tennessee here, a close one at Stanford there, and long stretches where they lean hard on hot shooting from the perimeter guys to stay on schedule. Here is where the matchup tilts in a way that fans feel before they even see the box score. The confirmed swing piece is availability. Louisville's star freshman point guard Mikel Brown Jr., giving them around 16.6 points and 5.1 assists per game, is ruled out again with that lingering lower back issue, while Duke is mostly intact outside of backup center Ifeanyi Ufochukwu, so the rotation that actually drives their identity is all expected to go. So Louisville is once again trying to run that high-octane system without the main organizer who usually presses the gas and calls out the sets, and they have to do it against a defense that already holds opponents well below what Louisville is used to seeing on the scoreboard. Duke, on the flip side, can throw out different lineup looks, has more ways to win in the half court when the game slows down, and has already proven it can walk into a true road cauldron and function like that 66-60 grinder at Michigan State's Breslin Center, where they had to live with tough possessions and still came out with the result. When you add up the healthier rotation, the sturdier baseline defense, the deeper front court, and the fact that their recent road resume already includes handling that kind of environment, that short spread starts to feel less like a warning and more like a small nudge toward the side that has more answers if things get bumpy. As our first pick for this matchup, the Duke Blue Devils to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Books listing this around 161.5 are basically asking a simple question: do you truly believe these two are going to play 40 minutes of full track meet basketball with almost no long, sweaty half-court possessions? On paper, the raw scoring numbers certainly try to sell that story. Louisville is sitting around 91.6 points per game, Duke around 87.3, and if you just mash those together without thinking about pace or opposition, it sounds like fireworks. But once you zoom out and look at how their games actually land against comparable competition, the picture is a lot calmer. Duke's contests, when you blend what they score with what they allow, tend to settle in the low 150s on average, and Louisville's often finish just under 160, both below that current number, which hints that the posted total is assuming things go right on offense for a long time with very little resistance. History between these programs quietly backs that up too. Recent head-to-head meetings between these brands have come in around 141 total points on average, roughly 20 points under tonight's number, which is a pretty big gap, even allowing for changes in coaches, schemes, and recruiting classes cycling through. If you check their biggest test from this season, the same pattern repeats. Duke over Michigan State 66-60 and over Florida 67-66, games that felt like high-level half-court chess with both teams walking the ball up and working through actions instead of just trading breakaway highlights. Louisville, even with that big season scoring average, has already been pulled into more physical, slower affairs than that top-line number suggests, like 83-62 at Tennessee and 80-76 at Stanford, both against high major defenses that were happy to bump cutters, guard the glass, and live with a few ugly possessions if it meant dragging the tempo down. Now factor in that Louisville is again without Brown, the guard who usually sets tempo and helps them flow into early offense, while Duke brings a defense with rim protection and plenty of length at multiple spots, and it becomes easier to picture long shot clock trips, multiple actions per possession, and some empty trips both ways that eat time without adding points. In a primetime top 20 Atlantic Coast Conference clash, with scouting detailed, rotations tightened, and both coaching staffs very aware that transition defense and rebounding usually decide games like this, the natural pressure tends to slow players down a touch, not speed them up, so it feels far more realistic that we see a tough, emotional, but slightly more controlled scoring environment rather than a carefree shootout from tip to buzzer. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Texas Tech versus Houston. Honestly, this matchup in Houston feels like one of those games where the number hanging next to the underdog might end up telling the more interesting story than the final score does. Two ranked teams, one very loud building, and two coaches who see the world in very different ways. Houston loves control. They like to slow the pace, squeeze the clock, and make every possession feel like a dentist appointment you did not schedule. Their defense has been holding opponents to right around 60 points a night, and that is not just a one-week hot streak. That is baked into who they are, with that slow, grinding tempo that sits near the very bottom of the country. At home, in the Fertitta Center, that style gets even tougher to deal with because it is not just 5 defenders, it is 5 defenders and a whole arena that seems to inhale every time the opponent brings the ball over half court. On the other side, Texas Tech is not walking in scared, they are walking in hot. They come in with an 11-3 record, fresh off dropping triple digits on Oklahoma State, and they are not shy about playing with a bit of swagger. They like spacing, they like movement, and they are more than happy to let it fly from deep, especially when they get into that rhythm where the ball does not stick and everyone touches it on a given trip. They sit in that sweet spot where the pace is not wild, but the offense is efficient, and that combination can be really annoying for a favorite that wants simple, predictable possessions. Here is the thing, Houston's slow tempo quietly does something that a lot of casual bettors forget. When you play fewer possessions, you shrink the room for error for the favorite. If the game is played in a 60-something possession window instead of the 70s, each empty trip, each turnover, each contested three that rims out matters a little bit more. Even a small underdog with a live offense can stick around in that kind of environment, especially if they can string together a couple of made threes in a row. Texas Tech is built to take advantage of that sort of tension. They shoot a high volume of threes, they have top-level scoring options who are comfortable creating in the half court, and they are not just chucking, they are hitting at an efficient clip so far this season. You do not get to rankings in the teens by accident, and you definitely do not get there in the Big 12 without being able to handle physicality, hostile gyms, and nights when nothing comes easy. There is also a psychological piece here. Houston is carrying the pressure of the ranking, the home crowd, and the target on their back, while Tech can play with a bit more freedom, knowing that every made shot tilts that pressure a little more onto the home side. You can also look at how both coaches lean when things get tight. Houston is happy to slow it down even more, run offense deep into the clock, and lean into defense and rebounding. Texas Tech is comfortable living in high-variance spots, especially from the arc, and that kind of contrast can keep a game inside a handful of possessions for a long time. If this turns into the kind of game where both teams trade long, physical half-court possessions, it does not take many breaks, a couple of loose balls, or a brief shooting run for the underdog to stay attached on the scoreboard. So when you put together Houston's methodical style, the smaller possession count, Texas Tech's confident and efficient offense, and the natural pressure that lives on a ranked home favorite in early conference play, you can see why people might look twice at the points being offered rather than just the name on the front of the jersey. As our first pick for this matchup, the Texas Tech Red Raiders to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The scoreboard total sits in that low 140s neighborhood, which on paper looks fair if you only stare at season averages, because Texas Tech has been scoring in the low 80s and Houston has lived in the upper 70s. But that is the trap. Averages tell the story of who these teams are in general, not who they become when they are facing each other with a packed Big 12 building and both defenses fully locked in. Houston's identity on this front is very clear. They are happy to slow games into a crawl. They sit near the very bottom nationally in tempo, and they make you work through a set defense almost every time down. They cut off the easy stuff, they get back in transition, and they defend the glass like it is personal. That kind of structure tends to squeeze totals down, because even when the shots fall, they fall out of longer, more deliberate possessions that chew through the shot clock. Texas Tech, meanwhile, gives off the vibe of a team that plays in track meets because of those big scoring nights, like the recent game where they hung 102 on Oklahoma State. But if you peel away the headline, what you see is an offense that is more about efficiency and shot profile than raw speed. They score a lot because they shoot the ball well and they take a lot of threes, not because they are racing up and down every possession. Against Houston, those threes are going to come against a set defense that closes hard, challenges shooters, and forces you to string together multiple actions just to get a clean look. Let me explain why that matters for the total. High-volume threes sound like they scream points, but against a defense like Houston's, they also mean you are living with the possibility of long stretches where the shots just do not drop. Threes are boom or bust by nature. A couple of empty trips in a row in a fast game might not matter much, but in a slow one where each team gets only a limited number of possessions, those droughts can drag the total down in a hurry. There is also the rotation and physicality angle. Texas Tech has some front court depth limited by redshirt and injury situations, which means their rotation can tighten up, especially in a bruising game where the refs let contact go for a while. Houston, for their part, leans on core pieces that can stay on the floor for big minutes and that can turn the game into a steady, half-court slugfest instead of a free-flowing showcase. Fewer usable bench minutes often translates into coaches slowing the game down a bit, calling sets, burning timeouts to manage fatigue, and all of that quietly tugs the scoring downward. And then you add the Big 12 factor. Conference games in January between two ranked teams often feel like every possession is being graded. Players defend a little harder, coaches get a little more conservative with shot selection, and both sides know that one bad 2-minute stretch can swing not just the game but the narrative around their season. That tension usually favors cleaner defense over loose, high-scoring chaos. So when you blend Houston's slow tempo and stingy defense, Texas Tech's efficient but three-heavy offense that will be forced to work in the half court, some rotation tightness, and the natural gravity of a Big 12 grinder, it becomes a lot easier to picture a game that plays inside the number on the scoreboard rather than racing past it. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Texas versus Tennessee. Let's set the scene in Knoxville because this one has that classic big game feeling written all over it. Texas walks into Food City Center like the team that just emptied the tank in a thriller and now has to step into a louder room with brighter lights and a crowd that is very much not rooting for them. Tennessee has been flat-out ruthless in this building, sitting at a perfect 8-0 at home and playing like they know every dead spot on that floor. They are winning by about 18 points per night overall, locking teams down to just 65.3 points per game. And those recent home scores are not polite either, with that run of 83-62 against Louisville, 94-52 against Gardner-Webb, and 105-54 against South Carolina State looking less like a schedule and more like a warning label. You can almost feel how suffocating that gets when the Vols start stacking stops. The crowd senses blood, and suddenly every loose ball somehow finds a player in orange. On the other side, Texas is coming off that 101-98 overtime loss to Mississippi State, the kind of game that looks fun on social media, but not so fun in the legs 2 days later. Dalen Swain going for 34 points and 14 boards is the sort of performance that usually wins you a night, and instead it turned into a how did we lose that film session, with the Longhorns giving up 19 offensive rebounds and 21 second chance points while still walking out with an L. Now the reward is a trip into a gym that can pack in over 20,000 people, and this time most of those people are there to roar for a top 20 Tennessee team that has already built a reputation as one of the tougher home environments in the Southeastern Conference. From the betting side, the number tells you exactly how the market feels about that combo. Tennessee is sitting around a 10.5 point favorite at home, with the Vols at 10-4-0 on the season, Texas at 9-5-0, and both squads effectively at full strength based on the standard public reports you and I actually see on a normal betting day. Here is where the matchup starts to tilt in a very specific direction. The underlying results back up what you feel watching this Tennessee team. They are 8-0 at home and 9-2-0 in games that finish by double digits, which is exactly what you would expect from a group that leans on physicality and lets the game snowball once they get on top. Texas comes in at 0-1-0 in Southeastern Conference play and just 4-5-0 against teams with winning records, which screams dangerous but volatile, the team you never fully trust on the road in a place like this. Tennessee pounds the glass with a plus 13.7 rebounding margin and 43.1 boards per game, and that is the sort of thing that wears on you when you have already emptied the tank in overtime the game before. Add in the fact that the Vols are handing out around 19.4 assists per night, so the ball does not stick and they do not need one hero to get hot, while Texas is closer to that our talent can figure it out identity where the shot quality can drift a little, and you get a very familiar story. The deeper, more connected home team keeps turning stops into runs, uses that crowd as lighter fluid on every mini surge, and over the course of 40 minutes takes what might be a competitive matchup for a while and slowly stretches it toward another double-digit result that lines up with why this is the largest spread Texas has seen so far this season. As our first pick for this matchup, the Tennessee Volunteers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now, shifting away from who covers and looking only at how many points we are likely to see, the total hangs in a very tempting spot. A number in the low 100s and 50s immediately tugs at the part of your brain that remembers highlights and not shot clock violations, and when you think about Texas, you can understand why. On paper, Longhorn games have felt like track meets, with Texas scoring 88.6 points per game and giving up 73.4, which puts their typical night right around a combined 162 points. That is the kind of profile that makes casual bettors look at a total in the 152.5 to 153.5 range and think, yeah, they can get there. Tennessee, though, lives in a slightly different basketball universe. Their average game lands closer to 148.6 total points, with 83.3 scored and 65.3 allowed, and that defensive side is not a rumor. Opponents are shooting only 38.2% from the field and under 29% from three, and when you mix that with the way Tennessee controls the glass, you start to picture a game that has a lot more grinding in the half court than flying up and down in transition. So the total that is hanging out in that 152.5 to 153.5 window is sitting almost exactly between Texas chaos and Tennessee control, and that is where it gets interesting. Recent box scores make the overlook attractive. Tennessee just dropped 105 at home in a demolition. Texas just played that 101-98 overtime thriller, and it is easy to let those fireworks color your expectations. The tricky part is that games like that quietly inflate season-long averages, even though they are not the most common style you get when the stakes go up and both teams know every possession is a little heavier. This is a real statement spot, with a ranked Tennessee squad sitting in the top 25 in both major polls and an unranked Texas team trying to stamp a new identity under a fresh staff and a portal-heavy roster. In that setting, it is very reasonable to expect, and yes, this is a projection rather than a promise, that both coaches tighten things up. You are talking about longer possessions, more half-court sets, more focus on getting back on defense, and a very clear emphasis on making Texas feel every cut and every catch after they just got punished on the glass for those 19 offensive boards and 21 second chance points they surrendered to Mississippi State. Tennessee's whole profile backs up the idea of a game that can lean lower than the market number. They have that big rebounding advantage. They are used to holding teams in the mid-60s, and while Texas has seen the total go 8-5 to 0 toward the over and Tennessee sits 8-6 to 0 on totals, those records also tell you something else. The books have already been hanging some fairly high numbers on these teams, and the results suggest there is only so much air left to squeeze out on the high side. With two offenses that absolutely can score, but one team very comfortable dragging things into a more physical, defense-first contest inside a loud building, the picture that keeps coming up is less of a wild shootout and more of a game that lives closer to the high 100s and 40s than the mid 100s and 50s. So while the raw season averages might nudge you toward an over at first glance, once you factor in the context, the matchup, and the likely game script in a spotlight Southeastern Conference clash, that total starts to look just a touch inflated. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. TCU versus Kansas. Allen Fieldhouse on a Big 12 night does not really feel like a normal gym. It feels more like someone turned a pressure cooker into a basketball court. The noise stacks on you, the floor almost hums a little, and that kind of setting quietly matters just as much as whatever numbers you have pulled up on your phone. You have Kansas walking back into that building after some early bumps, including that conference opening loss at UCF, sitting at 10-4 and still carrying that top-tier national ranking, so there is this clear sense of a group that knows it owes its home crowd a stronger response. On the other side, TCU comes in feeling loose, sitting at 11-3 and fresh off a performance where its defense strangled a Baylor offense that had been lighting people up, which gives them every reason to believe their disruptive style can travel. That emotional split is interesting, one team trying to prove the last showing was a one-off, the other trying to prove the last showing was the new normal. The betting market quietly reflects that tension, with Kansas listed as a solid home favorite by around 7.5 points and the money line sitting in that mid-300 zone that says bookmakers respect the Jayhawks but are not calling it a walkover. Stylistically, TCU has been happiest in those messy, scramble-heavy games where turnovers turn into instant fast breaks and the game feels like a pickup run that suddenly counts. Kansas is built for something very different. They are comfortable dragging you into a half-court quiz where every possession requires you to solve a new problem, especially in their own building where the coaching staff has stacked up a ridiculous long-term record. When you blend the crowd, the sideline experience, the defensive potential, and the usual lean referees give to a confident, attacking home team, this sets up more like a night where the home favorite can stretch some separation over time rather than sweat a coin flip in the final minute. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kansas Jayhawks to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, this matchup almost waves a flag at people who like higher scoring games, and that is exactly why it deserves a closer look instead of an automatic lean toward more points. TCU's basic profile pops off the page. They have been scoring around 80 per night while allowing opponents somewhere in the mid-60s, and Kansas is living in the mid-70s on offense, so a projected number sitting at 137.5 can feel a little low if you only glance at those averages. Here is the thing, though, raw numbers do not tell you which games are doing the heavy lifting. TCU just dropped a huge number, 115 points, on Jackson State in what was essentially a track meet, the kind of game that looks fun on a highlight reel but also inflates season stats in a hurry. When the Horned Frogs stepped up in class against Baylor, the story flipped. That game turned into more of a grind, their defense turned up, and an elite attack was held down in a way that looked a lot more like a conference chess match than an all-star showcase. Kansas adds another layer to that picture, coming into this one off a loss, with a staff that has a long history of tightening things up defensively at home. You can almost feel the emphasis shifting toward making every half-court possession feel heavy, especially with that crowd leaning on every pass. Both teams are aggressive on the glass, which naturally eats clock and creates those physical, multi-shot possessions that are great for coaches and brutal for anyone needing a scoreboard to explode. Both have every reason to sprint back and cut off easy transition chances after seeing what TCU can do in the open floor, and that kind of mutual understanding usually drags games into more controlled, measured rhythms. So while the surface-level scoring numbers whisper one story, the way these two are likely to approach this particular night hints at something more like a 40-minute stress test where buckets feel earned, where second-chance battles matter, and where the final total sits below what those season averages might make you expect at first glance. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.